Welcome back to the Real Estate Rat Pack Radio Show with Chris, Joe, and Rob. The crew is taking your calls, so dial in at 1-800-808-5548.
And we are back. Having a good time, saying hello to everybody as
Getting
usual.
away, but some people walk by in the hallway there.
Yes.
So, we've got
The adoring fan.
Two people here have got so much information. I don't know where to begin with that. But Oscar, let's kind of go back to what you were talking about. And you've gone around the country and consulted with a lot of associations and things like that. What kind of information you typically give out? That's what I want to kind of get for our listeners and things like that.
To complement what Richard was saying, especially with like AMPI, I'd worked pretty closely with them several years back in the whole MLS concept, and just the idea of agency relationships is
foreign to them.
It's foreign to them. It's foreign to them.
That was pretty
and I think for the challenge for the real estate professional here is getting them to explain that, in simple terms for them to understand the whole lending process and things like that. And to your point about MLSs, it just doesn't exist. But one of the things that in consulting with different associations and different and the National Association of Realtors, it was so dramatically different from what you would have here in the U.S. to Mexico, and then we did work with Russia and also with China. And just trying to get them to understand, or they were trying to understand our practices, and because we have the most complex real estate system in the world. I mean, there's no doubt in terms of transference of ownership and the lending components and things like that. So it's pretty. It's pretty complex, so it's overwhelming when somebody comes to this country and explaining that. And it's not that, I think especially here in Houston, it's critically important that I think real estate professionals understand that dynamic, because a lot of your buyers, at 39% I mentioned earlier, is going to be from another country. And
that's amazing.
The husband may understand Western business practices, but who's making the decision.
Right. Well, and you mentioned very interesting, education being the key form of that. We have individuals coming in from Latin America and from Europe, for example. I can tell you from a financing perspective, my Europeans generally want to know how often they have to go back to the bank to renegotiate their arms, because that's very common over there in Europe. Whereas when I tell them, no, you're on a fixed rate here, you don't have to worry about that anymore, they're joyed for it. And in the Latin American community, generally speaking, it's, okay, so do I have to pay cash or can I get a little bit of financing? And you have to tell them is, well, guess what? You can get up to 70 or 80% financing on some of these deals.
Yes.
So it is interesting that education portion that you're talking about, because it's extremely important to always educate them not only on real estate and finance, but just the general process. Because you're right, it is a lot of moving parts to it. Between contract to close. They don't have all that.
Yes,
they don't go through inspections and option periods and renegotiation. They don't go through any of that.
Yeah. And then you're going to have the religious and cultural nuances that come into play as well in the transaction, especially the negotiation piece. I mean, there's some cultures that will negotiate with you post closing.
Oh yeah,
they want to keep negotiating. And it's like, well,
a lot of people think, well, once we got the contract agreed upon, that's the beginning.
Yeah, that's the beginning.
That's so true. I run into that a lot. I'm a CIPS instructor. For those who don't know,
what CIPS is.
The CIPS is an NAR sponsored certification for Certified International Property Specialist, which is, for me, one of the best tools that anybody.
You actually teach that class.
Yes, I am a certified instructor. And I have taught that class here in Houston twice, and we're looking at a couple more courses this year here in Texas. But anyway, that course teaches how to be able to deal with these oncoming buyers. And that's one of the things that we have to explain to them, that the process is different, that the expectations are different, and that we're not things are not run the way they are in their countries.
I'm going to ask one of the obvious questions. When people come in, they're coming in from other countries, whether it's China or Mexico or South America. Do they have a tendency to gravitate to people here who are like them and speak their language? Because I've always understood that they might speak English very well, but they like to do business details in their native language.
Yes and no. I think it depends on the individual, because one of the things, the dynamics we run into a lot is, especially from, say, India or China, they don't want others knowing their business.
Good point.
And so they're very, understand the cultures are very close and tight, and the internet has nothing on them. If somebody does something wrong, everybody else in the community knows it, within seconds. But so a lot of times they'll want someone who is not, say, Korean, from India, or Chinese. They want somebody who's an American that can facilitate it for them, so that nobody else knows their business. And so they're very. Some of them are very guarded. Others are not, with the language barrier or the religious nuances. they'll say, no, I'd prefer to work with somebody.
Well, the one thing
from
about
our culture.
on HR.com, you can actually search by language. And I had an agent in my office who is from Moldova, and she was found because they were Russian. They were here working, bought a man two house over in Bel Air, but he had parents who were moving here also, and they spoke no English. And so that was a perfect fit for them, was to have somebody that speak the Russian language, even though, the first buyers spoke English perfectly.
What's funny is sometimes I'll run into agents that say, well, I don't want to deal with my own kind because they're a pain in the butt, you know. So they know their own kind. You know?
But you know, what you're saying is interesting because, you know, I would say 50% of my clientele is international. And yet most of the time when they sit down with me, they have no idea about the languages that I speak.
Right.
So they will sit down with me and think I am a traditional, you know, American, speak English, etc.
The whitest Mexican I've ever
Exactly,
seen.
right? And then all of a sudden they'll speak Portuguese or Spanish, and I'll understand absolutely right at that point right there. When I make that translation to them, and they sit there and they're dumbfounded. You know, they're whoa, what's going on? Now we continue the conversation in the native language, but you're right. It's never been an inhibitor though for them to do so. Right. And in fact, one of the things that I get told all the time is you don't promote what you do enough, Chris. You don't promote English being your second language. But a lot of times I don't have to, because you're right, it's not an inhibitor. Individuals are not coming over here and saying, I want to do business in this language. It's, I want to do business with the best person available in the industry.
And, you know, and quite frankly, the internet has helped close that gap, because they can gather now information on, you know, lending practices and things like that here in the U.S., and, you know, like when you said something about an arm, you know, if you say that to some people who don't understand the lending things, they're going to say, wow, Americans really give their body parts for a house. It's really serious. You know?
I
mean, sometimes I think so, by the way.
and
that's
really
no joke.
Really good. You have to give a leg to go with it.
Yeah, that's right. Or a kidney.
And then, so anyway, when you also do a lot with generational work, Oscar.
And believe it or not, that does come into play with foreign buyers. Because when we look at Houston's profile, a disproportionate disproportionate portion of the population is older whites. Now, the younger population is young, Hispanic, Asian.
So I am a disproportionate statistic now. Is that what you're saying?
I'm so sorry to say, yes.
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, they're collecting funds, I think, for assisted living.
Yes. That is one of the fundraisers we do throughout the year.
Your time will come, but maybe.
We weren't going to tell Rob yet, Oscar. I mean, come on.
But one of the
blowing our surprises.
We're going to say one of those birthday.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. Which is next month, January 26th. Whoever wants to go out and get a gift.
Well, most of the 14th, by the way.
Hey, I think the hurricanes are on sale at Bed Bath & Beyond. You know? The hurricanes. You know,
So, hurricanes, yes.
Yeah, hurricanes.
So
those are awesome.
Do you see a profile of people who are what age group that are coming here?
I think what we see is the average age is of around 30, 28 to 30. Now, if they're students, it's younger. But what you have with, you know, for agents that I think
have shoes that old.
What pleases the
You didn't say underwear.
Yeah, really.
See, you guys. I've been wearing the headphones now for most of the show.
He's hearing all the sounds.
We have to wear them now, because when we don't wear the headphones, we can't hear all the fun goat sounds and goat screams and the cash register and all the other stuff that Ashley throws in. So.
Gotcha.
You know, I was talking about this off on one of the breaks, that Rob and I were out at dinner with some friends last night doing our cigar group, and to the table next to us was a table of they looked almost out of high school, it's 20-somethings, and just getting to talk to them. They were all geological engineers, and they were from various parts of the country.
Right.
And they had moved here, and I'm like, this is Houston. This is the new face of Houston right here.
I think what makes the international piece of it different, though, is, you know, the population that's moving here is a young professional, and they're very high tech.
Yeah.
Very. So I mean, you have what I always tell agents is you've got an older population who has the inventory that they've been in for 30 years. So you have to be prepared to still do stuff the old traditional way with, you know, paper, and call them on the phone. They're not going to text you, and they're not going to message you on Facebook.
Yeah.
But then you have the other end of the spectrum, that young buyer who's still going to rely on their parents. There's going to be cultural nuances. There's going to be religious nuances, and they're totally digital. You know, so you have to be able to work that spectrum.
You know, and you're right. You know, one of the things I do, I give a class in reference to how to market to the Latin American buyer. Rob took it actually when we were talking about that, and that's one of the things I talk about is you have to understand how to market to the culture, but within the culture, you also have those generational differences.
Right.
You have the parents who want to be treated one way, and generally the children, though, while they still look back to their elders and they still have a tradition they follow, they're going to be more apt to look at technology as their first choice.
Absolutely.
And so, so you have to understand how to identify that really fast in that process and understand how they want to be communicated with, which is still traditional real estate across the board, no matter who you're dealing with.
Yeah, and there's several websites out there like Mundos. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that. It's mun2.com, and it's for that young Hispanic professional that kind of walks both cultures. They do the stuff in English, but they also understand Spanish or prefer Spanish.
And we're getting a lot of people moving into, of course, medical. We cannot fulfill our medical. So I know there's a lot of people who are from India and Pakistan who get their MDs, and we have kind of fallen short, I think, on math and science, people.
The STEM, yeah.
And so we have a huge need for that population to move here.
Here I'm going to digress a little bit. Well, one of the challenges, I think, for Houston's future, and Dr. Kleinberg at Rice University talks about this as well, is that we look at the dropout rate among the Hispanic population and some of the, even the Asian population, it's incredibly high. And so if our workforce is to develop, and we can keep Houston on this economic train it's on, I think we're going to have to make some more effort toward, improving the STEM sides of things, but also the trade systems, because we're falling behind big time.
Yeah, and again, math and sciences has been our biggest downfall in the U.S. Richard, you had something.
Yeah, we were talking earlier about the composition of the profile of the buyers. I have all sorts of buyers. We've got the buyer that comes in because they want to buy a second home. We have the buyer who comes in because they want to relocate their family for. Predominantly, the people that come in from, say, the city of Mexico are looking to have a safe place, free from the crime
That's
and
a big
the
word
threat.
right there for safe.
Their safety is concerned. So a lot of the people will move to gated communities, or they'll move to Houston simply to get away from the violence and the fear of the threat or the violence in the particular cities. And so they actually end up relocating their family, their wives and the kids, and then they commute back and forth. Mm-hmm. I've got several clients that bought houses in the Woodlands in the north part of Houston, in the Galleria, and they will commute back and forth to Mexico City
amazing.
or whatever place.
Well, that's the amazing thing about the internet and that modern. You can pretty much my phone, my database system that we use at our company, everything. It's all internet based. I can literally pack my stuff up and go anywhere in the world, plug in, and it's just like I'm in the office. So it really gives us. I can see why there's so much a migration of the international client for that reason.
Virtual
it's
offices,
so much easier to do business now anywhere in the world.
Yeah,
we can virtually work anywhere also.
No pun intended. Virtually.
I've virtually been working.
And Rob, now that he got rid of his flip phone, he can almost do that as well.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey,
I like.
Just stop, Rob. Just stop. You're gonna lose.
I've been virtually working for years.
Yeah.
But to your point about and Richard's point about mobility, it's like Houston has become. You can get to Europe in 8 hours. I mean, and it used to be like it's a drive across the state. So it's much easier to move back and forth.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things we're going to continue talking about this in our last segment. I also want to get into talk about one of the things I talk about a lot is also the difference, understanding the differences within cultures. For example, what's the difference between a Latin American and Hispanic? Those are different things that sometimes people don't realize that is a difference out there that you have to look at. So we're going to come up against another break right now. Time flies when you're having fun. We got 15 more minutes. If you want to call us, reach us at 800-808-5548. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
I won't dance, madam, with you. My heart won't let my feet do things that they should do. You know what? You're lovely. You know what? You're so lovely. And oh, what you